What's going on, everybody? This is not your average Josh. If this is your first time watching any of my videos, what's going on? I'm glad that you're here, especially for this video. I will definitely say before I even get into this is definitely the most fun I've had this year at the theaters. And granted, it's only a few months in, but man, honestly, the best time I've had in a while. I really had a blast with this movie. And of course, as I mentioned, I'm talking about John Wick Chapter 4. Starring Keanu Reeves, the fourth movie in this franchise. Back again directing it, Chad Stahelski, I believe that's how you pronounce it. A phenomenal job with this movie, I think, in my opinion. I'll get into all the reasons why I love it. But before I get into my review, I do want to say, hit that like button, hit that comment button. I appreciate any feedback and support I get. You can also hit that subscribe button. You can follow me on TikTok. You can get me on Snapchat, where I will post content similar to this. But for the most part, my content will be here on this YouTube channel, Not Your Average Josh. So again, I appreciate everything, all the support. But let's get into the review of John Wick Chapter 4. John Wick uncovers a path to defeating the High Table, but before he can earn his freedom, Wick must face off against a new enemy with powerful alliances across the globe and forces that turn old friends into new foes. As I said, I had a blast with this movie. I'm not even gonna come out of the gate slow. I'm just gonna come out hot. I'm sure if you're watching this review, you've probably seen other people's thoughts on this already and the glowing reception that this movie is getting. I could come in and be the one that's like, oh, you know, people are probably overhyping this movie a little too much. You know, it is what it is. But honestly, I don't think I can overhype this movie because I just had that much fun with it. This movie was everything that I expected and more. The action in this movie, and I'm not one of those people that action films are my favorite genre per se, but obviously, like anybody who loves movies, I appreciate a great action film, and to me, I think that is what this is. Of course, there is just a ridiculousness and a level of over-the-topness that is with this franchise at this point, specifically this movie. The product that you get with this is the perfect example of how you can do something over the top. Can do something that's borders on like superhero abilities and unbelievability, but if you do it in a great way, you know exactly what you are, and you just execute everything on such a perfect level. To me, I think those things can be overlooked because I was having such a good time with this that, yeah, some of those stuff that are generally silly in movies, it just becomes badass because this whole movie is just so great. And the runtime with this, I was a little concerned going into this, just a little bit under 3 hours. I was worried, is there going to be moments where I'm wishing that the plot is moved along a little faster? But this movie is just constantly just kept me engaged. I was just so immersed in this experience, and it wasn't even an idea of me accepting or buying into the idea of the ridiculousness that this movie does get to at times. The heights, continuing to up the ante in terms of the violence and just the carnage that takes place. All these people at this point coming after John Wick. And of course, if you don't know, if you haven't seen the first three movies, I would suggest at least going back and see the first one, because I do think you can at least be familiar with the John Wick character, but honestly, you don't really even need any of that stuff, in my belief, to enjoy this movie. This is just, at the end of the day, it's a couple of movies. On the surface, it's just an all-out action extravaganza, perfection in terms of the action scenes alone. It can just be a beautiful popcorn movie you watch and just enjoy the action and violence that is being displayed before you. But it's also a movie that's a culmination. As soon as this starts, you get this sort of 80s feel to this movie where you have Lawrence Fishburne's character, the Bowery King, making this huge, this like triumphant epic speech. Only like Lawrence Fishburne can. You have John Wick just punching over and over this immovable object that he was punching, and then you have this ring of fire that Lawrence Fishburne's character, the Bowery King, lights up in this warehouse that they're at, and you get immediately this build up and this setup to what this movie is going to be. I just loved every minute of it. I just bought into it, and I can understand people that the over-the-topness and the ridiculousness, the only thing I can really even see as a mixed thing potentially with this movie, I can see how that would turn some people off to where they just couldn't even necessarily get into this movie. But I think at the end of the day, as I said, this movie is just showing you what it is from the very beginning. All the cast that's in this movie is incredible. Like, it feels like a superhero movie in that way, where I cared more about the other characters besides John Wick in this movie than I did in any of the three movies at all. Like, Donnie Yen in this movie, he definitely stole the show from me, and honestly was probably my favorite character in the end of the day with this movie. Just all his fighting style, his moves were so badass. The choreography as a whole in this movie, I mean, it just can't be said enough. It can't be commended enough. It's almost unbelievable. Truly watching just the first action sequence that you get in this movie is It's so incredible. Like, I was just looking in amazement at this, how just the choreography all felt very different, very fresh. It felt very seamless. You felt like there was real action fighting going on. It didn't feel faked. The choreography was at such a peak level for the action genre that, I don't know, honestly, I know it sounds like I'm being hyperbolic, but this was just, it was so fun watching this. I was with my friends, and it was also, I was in a great environment for this movie as well. Went to the Thursday night screening, and I had a bunch of younger people around us for the screening that we were at, and they were very excited, cheering through various moments of this movie, all at the right times. It was a great crowd to be in, and there was definitely a few moments in this movie where I even cheered with the crowd too. Not even because I was like consciously making the decision to. I was just honestly wrapped up in the movie and just started cheering. And I don't usually do that much for movies, just because that's a warrant. And, you know, a moment where, you know, like Cap grabbing Mjolnir in game, a moment like that. And there was a couple moments in this movie that were like that. The movie was just so great. I was so wrapped up in it. We all were, everyone that was around me. And it was such a good time, man. It felt like an experience of what the movies are supposed to be like, especially with a movie like this. 3 or 4 like major sequences in this movie that are just so impressive, like the scale of it. And just watching it, you're wondering, how did they film this? How long did it take them to film this? Again, the choreography, the sequence in the middle of the street where there's just a bunch of cars coming at John Wick. There's a classic club scene in this movie, which I was very hyped for. That's one thing I really wanted in this movie going into it. From the first John Wick movie, I've loved that. Keanu Reeves in this movie, I think he has established himself officially as John Wick. Of course, everyone knows him from various other things, The Matrix being one of the huge ones, not the biggest one. But for me, I think I just like his character as John Wick the most out of any other characters he played. He is such a badass, man. Like, and the dialogue he uses in this movie, I'm sure for maybe an average viewer who's not as into these movies, maybe this is their first movie, somehow they're watching, might come off as a little awkward. There's even a line in this movie where it's leading into the third act of this movie. He's about to go through his last round of a bunch of motherfuckers he's gonna have to go through, and he has a line, "I'm going to need a gun." And it's just a simple little line. That's all he says, and there's a lot of various lines throughout where it just works for his character though. Like, it can come off as awkward, as I said, but I just love everything about that. He has this a nice balance of like stoicism, but also charisma. He found the right lane for the John Wick character. And again, just this movie is all about the action. You're gonna hear this probably from a lot of people that are talking about this movie. It is truly a masterpiece of its genre. It's hard to say this one's better than the first one for me, because I really did truly love that movie. I'm so like emotionally connected on his journey of getting back at the motherfuckers who killed the dog in the first one. This one doesn't have that, although it does have a dog character. And dude, I will say, the dog, man, is fucking awesome, bro. Like, the action the dog has in this movie is way more than I thought there was gonna be, and so great. There's a couple of emotional moments with the dog. Shamier Anderson, I believe that's how you say his name. It might be Shamier, I don't know. He played the character listed as Tracker. He was with the dog. Tracker itself, he was a very interesting character. Had some nuances there, actually. Surprising nuances. At the beginning, he's going after John Wick along with a bunch of other people, and then his character takes a few different turns in this movie that I kind of liked and appreciated and didn't expect, and I just really thought his character was a badass as well. Already mentioned Donnie Yen, kind of a little bit went into him. He just, for me, again, he just stole the show. I just loved, he had a few lines that were just comedic gold and just fit the moment very well. The punchline, the way he delivered it was fucking awesome. His action in this movie, I think I enjoyed watching his fighting in this movie the most, even over John Wick maybe. And I know it's tough because John Wick was fucking amazing. Keanu Reeves, man, the choreography in this, it's just fucking amazing. It's just literally, as you're watching these like 10 to 15 minute just continual action scenes where you don't think they can top it, and then it just continues to go, and it's nothing that ever feels too ridiculous that it takes me out of the moment. The action is so fucking brilliant, and the story is good enough throughout. I'm just in on it. I'm invested, and I want to see John Wick survive, but then I'm also connected to Donnie Yen's character, where him and John Wick have a conflict throughout this, but then they also work together at times, and I need to go watch more Donnie Yen stuff. So good at, again, the action, the fighting, but also he had some good emotional moments. Clancy Brown was in this. I fucking love Clancy Brown, man. A great fucking actor, not only live action, but also in animated work. And he honestly was just, not even close to the highlight of this, but I love him. I mean, I think he's great, and he was just almost like a little appetizer or something just in this, a little seasoning thrown in on this. You had, of course, Winston being played by Ian McShane. He, again, is great in this. The lines that he has with John Wick, what he has to go through at the beginning of this movie, him being in these movies, it continues to expand the world. I do have to mention Lance Reddick, R.I.P., of course. Crazy that he passed away just a few days, really, before this movie has this wide release. Very tough, man. I love seeing him in The Wire. I love The Wire. That is really the main thing I know him from. He was a great actor, man, and so it was bittersweet to see him in this movie. Hiroyuki Sanado as Shimazu. Man, I just literally watched 47 Ronin that he was in the other day. I'd never seen it before. Him and Keanu were in, and I thought he was great in that. I've seen him in other things as well. I think he is a great actor, and of course, anything where he's fighting in the same way of Donnie Yen. I just love enjoying the choreography when he's fighting. And he has some great moments in this movie as well. The woman that plays his daughter, Rina Sawayama as Akira. I'm probably going to butcher a few of these names. Sorry about that. But she had a few, oh my god, holy shit moments in this movie. Her fighting was very impressive. I was just not expecting it. I don't really know her too well if I've seen her in anything else, but she was just very badass. Them two together, it had some emotional moments as well. And that's what the thing that really surprised me the most. I knew the action was going to be great, but it did take me to a level above even when I thought of that. But I'll say the emotion in this movie, I was really caught up in, like I said, a lot of moments that I just wasn't expecting. Of course, you have Bill Skarsgård. I'd say his first couple of scenes, I was still kind of feeling him out. Didn't know how I felt about him in terms of being a good villain or a great villain. But then as the movie went on, he had great dialogue, great moments and scenes. He had the prowess, the feel of a villain. I know I'm gushing a lot about this movie, not really saying much negatives. I've kind of mentioned a few times here, though, at the risk of sounding repetitive, about how it is over the top and ridiculous at times. And there are a few moments where if I really think about it, you know, I was talking to my friends afterwards on the way back from the movie theater. And yeah, there were a few moments, if I really think about it, that were they did go over the line, almost into stupidity and certain things that happened, but the movie was just so epic, and I just loved it so much that those things just were looked over in the end by me. Not a perfect film by any means because of a lot of that, and there are some story elements, I'm sure if you look deeper at, where you can say, okay, this is where they needed to push the story along more, and would this have happened in real life? There's plenty of things throughout this movie that you can look into with that. But this movie it's what an action movie is supposed to be, at least in my opinion. What I look for in an action movie, I guess I will say, is probably the better way to put it. I would recommend this movie overall, obviously, if you can't tell. If you're going to see this movie, go out and see it as soon as you can. I think it's going to be a fun time at the theater. You can see it with a great crowd that is also good as well. Even when the trailers were starting, you know when you have a crowd that could potentially be annoying or they could be great, and I kind of had that when the trailers were starting for this movie. They were being loud, being noisy, and you know, I'm not the type of person that's gonna like yell at someone real quick or something. I never yell at anyone anyway, but like I was a little bit, you know, on the fence at first. Are these guys gonna be talking through the whole thing when it's inappropriate? But they were great. I was cheering with them as well at the times that needed to be cheered for. This is just a great crowd-pleasing movie. Just so many like, oh, and oh my god moments in this movie. It was just a blast, man. Seeing a movie like this, I just couldn't help but just appreciate the fact that movies seem to be back in full throat at this point, and I think this year is just going to be really good. And not that every movie is going to be good, but there's just so much promise with plenty of movies this year, and I think March has fully put that on display for everybody. But that is my main thoughts. I'm going to give John Wick Chapter 4 a 9.5 out of 10. Couldn't give it a perfect score because I do see flaws that are within this movie. Just for me, overall, I was able to look over most of them, if not all of them, in terms of my just enjoyment in watching this movie. But I can see how this is not a perfect movie, so I could not give it a 10. For me, a 9.5, just because I loved it so much. I've gushed over it enough.
You want more proof?
I do want to hear what you guys think. If you didn't like this movie, I would love to hear it in the comments. If you loved it like me, if you just liked it, if you thought it was kind of middle in the mid-tier, maybe you liked other John Wick movies better, whatever you think, I love hearing people's thoughts. Leave a like as well. That is very much appreciated. You can also hit that subscribe button if this is your first time watching any of my videos. I appreciate any of the support I do get. You can follow me on TikTok. You can add me on Snapchat, where I will post content similar to this. But for the most part, my content will be here on this YouTube channel, Not Your Average Josh. One thing I will mention, as I'm still here kind of at the end here, the locations in this movie, the cinematography as a whole, there was some just beautiful, picturesque moments that, for that alone, is just dying to be seen in a huge screen. IMAX, whatever biggest screen you can go to, at whatever theater you go to. This is a beautiful movie to look at. Look for more videos very soon, and I will talk to you guys later.